So you guys all ready for test review for the couple people we have in class and everyone else we have on Zoom? We'll probably get some stragglers in, as always. But like I said, today we are doing test review. Good morning. So I have 15 through Zoom. So plus my couple people in class. So awesome. Okay, so a couple housekeeping things before we go ahead and get started. I have put this into our Canvas for you guys for some additional readings for the ethnography. These are not required readings. These are just some ones that you can go ahead and check out depending on what kind of findings you're going to be looking for in your ethnography. I haven't quite finished it yet. As you can see, there's a whole bunch more ones that I'm going to go and fill in, but I'm going to try to get a couple ones on here to help you organize some thoughts, and these you can also cite and stuff as well if you would like to do that. But what our plan for today is our test review, so that means people on Zoom, I do expect you to be answering and participating, because when you answer a question, I will go in here and I will type the answer, and you guys can use this on your test as your notes, because you guys are giving the answers. It will be available to you. So any questions before we go ahead and get started? Second half, we'll be talking about interviewing for the ethnography. But first things first, test review. So who knows what culture is? Who wants to answer that? You guys can either speak up or you can toss it into the chat, whatever works.
Is it a group of people that like believe the same things?
Yep, at its most basic form, a culture is a group of people that believe the same things. Does anyone want to add anything onto that? Jace, you look like you're going to have some thoughts today.
Not on this one, maybe some other ones.
Okay.
It involves perception and values.
So involving perception and values. So a culture would share a similar perception of events. They would share some values. So if we think of American culture, some of the values we might share would be freedom, financial security. We might value our families, things like that. So anything else you want to add to culture? So what are some examples of different cultures that we might want to think of to add to this? Come on, guys, you're doing your ethnographies over cultures.
Different people around the world.
What was that? I had two people overlapping.
Go ahead.
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabian, Chilean, American.
Japanese, Chinese.
Yeah. So those are all overarching nation cultures, national cultures. We also have subcultures. So subcultures might be like punks, skaters.
I would even say within like America, like the East Coast versus the West Coast.
Yeah, regional cultures, definitely, like the Midwest, Southwest is very different compared to East Coast, West Coast. So do we want to move on to question number 2? So this one might require a little bit of elaboration on your guys' part. But can you guys give me any like key points about how can context change how we behave in different situations?
Maybe like might have like a family get together, so like that, but one might be for birthday, one might be for funeral.
Definitely.
So, definitely gonna act in those two situations.
Yeah, so the overarching context might be family get together, but if you're getting together for a birthday, you're going to communicate very differently and tell different kinds of stories and interact vastly different than you would if you are at a funeral. You know, there's a different dress code, there's different language that you use, but that's a huge contextual difference, even if it might be the same or a similar group of people.
I would say that the context of humor would change. Like, I feel like you could tell a joke to somebody and they will react completely different versus somebody else.
Yeah, so in some places, it's more appropriate to use humor. Like in some workplaces, you can use humor, you can joke around with your colleagues, but if you maybe go overseas, even in the same company, if it's a multinational company and try to be humorous, might not go over so well. Or if you try to use humor at a funeral, might not go over so well depending on who your family is, right? Honestly, that's probably about the gist of it. So that should be pretty good for that one. Does anyone have anything else to add for this one before we move on to this next one? Okay. So what do you guys think the job of a cross-cultural trainer would be? So in the context of a big international or multinational company, what might a cross-cultural trainer do?
Importing.
What was that?
Importing.
Importing? I'm
Like,
uh,
like they have to know like the culture to even set up a meeting, a meet in person.
oh, okay. So I heard something else when you first said it. So their job is to
Like negotiate.
know cultures, to negotiate. Yeah, so particularly cross-culturally, right? So a cross-cultural trainer would be someone who is teaching, like Jace, if you worked for Sony and you had to go over to Japan to work at the Japanese brand. So the cross-cultural trainer would sit down with Jace and say, okay, here are some things that you need to know before you go over there. This is how you deal with these particular types of people. So when someone gives you their business card, you take it with both hands. You know, when you go to meet someone, you know, this is how you bow, this is how you interact. You know, when they ask you out for dinner or to go whatever after work, this is how you need to react to that, or this is how you should respond. You know, is there any gifts being exchanged? So like in China, gift giving is a really big thing in business. Americans, we don't do that too much because, you know, we see that kind of as bribery, right? You know, if someone gives us a gift, we think, okay, do we need to accept that? But in China, that's the norm. Like that's just part of the culture. So Jace would have to be able to say, okay, well, this is part of the norm here in China, or this is the norm here in Japan. So this is how I need to react to that.
In Japan, women actually have to wear heels and pantsuits to meetings, business meetings.
So if, I guess I'm the only woman right now here in class, so if I went over to Japan to work, then I'd have to know that I have to wear heels. Like I can't wear my flip-flops to work anymore. Okay. So anything to add to that one before we move on to self-reflection and self-reflexivity?
Would the cross-cultural trainer also act as a translator, or is that just a completely separate job?
They could in certain contexts, like depending on what they're trained in. They could give like minor language lessons. So let's go back to our Jace example of going to Japan. If he needed some minor language lessons, they might give him that, or they might be like, okay, well, Caleb speaks Japanese. You know, you need to go meet up with Caleb and do some language lessons. It would just honestly depend on what that particular person would be trained in. So they might or they might not.
Yeah, okay.
So is self-reflection and self-reflexivity important in intercultural communication? And how can we use this in order to improve our own intercultural communication?
I'd say it's definitely important because you just need to know how you react to certain situations, and when you know that, you know how you'll like, I don't know, you can just kind of see how you'll react like compared to the other cultures.
Yeah, so if we learn how we behave and react in certain situations, we can compare it to how other cultures may react, and maybe they have a better way to deal with the situation. Maybe learn from that. When we learn who we are, we can better try to understand other people. Like when we know where we come from, we can be more understanding to where other people are coming from and be able to put ourselves in their shoes. You know, we might not have to agree with everything that they believe or that what they think, but you know, they probably don't agree with us 100% either. So when we can realize that, then we can really start to break down those barriers. How do you spell understanding? But understanding. So. Anything else anyone wants to add on to that one? Because this was one of our 6 imperatives for learning. So I guess we're going to talk about it down here again too. So, okay, so moving on to the 6 imperatives. So first one's first. So self-awareness, self-reflexivity. So can someone please give me an example of why it's important to be self-aware? I mean, we kind of talked about it in this one, but does anyone have another one?
Like an example?
Uh-huh.
Like, well, I don't know. Maybe it's like somebody's like talking, like, let's say somebody from Chicago is talking to somebody from like Georgia, and the guy from Chicago talking to the guy from Georgia is like, you know, you kind of sound funny. But the guy from Georgia's like, no, you sound funny. And he'll be like, hey, he thinks I sound funny too. So, like, maybe we just both sound normal, but since we're different, I don't know. Being aware that he sounds funny as well. That's the best example I could come up with.
Yeah, I can see that. So being aware that like you might not have an accent to yourself, but you might to other people. I mean, that's a really straightforward example, but I think that definitely works. So being aware of who you are and how you talk and how other people may interpret that. So interesting fact, if you notice, like news presenters, I'm not sure how many of you guys actually watch television news anymore. Most of them don't have an accent, no matter where they're from. Like you could be watching news from like Tennessee or Georgia or Texas, and they still talk with a Midwestern accent. Because the Midwestern accent is more easily understood by a majority of Americans, like compared to like if you have like a really, really thick East Coast accent or a really, really thick Southern accent. So just interesting fact for you guys. So newscasters practice a Midwestern accent. So demographic imperative, so changing demographics in the US in particular. So what would be an example of changing demographics that would make it important for us to care about this?
Well, I mean, a good example is that, like, we have this huge population of baby boomers that are, you know, they're older, they're all reaching retirement. So the things that they're concerned with or that are important to them are going to be a lot different than, you know, the Gen Xers or the millennials, you know, in terms of lots of things, money, availability of health care, all these things will play, and that's a demographic, you know, imperative. But understanding those things really help us, you know, see where they're coming from. I remember, you know, talking to my grandfather when he was still alive, and he had such different views than I did. And I didn't understand it then, but now I look back and I realize that his needs were different than mine, and that's why his views were so much different.
Yeah, definitely. Like age is one of those demographics that we might not think about all the time, because particularly when we're talking about, you know, intercultural, we may be looking at, you know, race or ethnicity or national origin, but age is also a huge one. And, you know, people who are the baby boomers are vastly different than us, you know, so much to an extent that it probably is their own separate culture, or technically probably a subculture. But still, like, you're communicating across a huge gap most of the time. Anyone have anything more for demographic, or do we want to move on to economic? Someone start something in the chat. Economic, so money matters.
Yeah, money's a big deal. I see how the State Department in America has used the economic influence of our country as a tool for creating allies or developing connections with other countries. Probably the two that pop to mind are China and South Korea. You know, we all see Kia and Hyundai cars in America, and, you know, those, you know, we've used the economic opportunities of supplying America things as a way for those countries to really improve the conditions for their people and their workers. That's just my take on it.
Yep. Do you guys remember the story of the Nova? I think that was the GMC Nova, the car, no go, that they tried to market in South America and made no money on it, even though it did well in the US. So that would also be the example also of economics. So the Nova car in US versus America. You know, with this too, like businesses, we can make more money the more diversity we have. So, you know, when you have large companies and large businesses, they have an economic need, an economic imperative to have as many different types of people within their business as possible. Because, you know, one head is great, two heads is better, but three heads, three brains from all different places, you know, might even be better than just two. Because you have people who have a wide variety of experiences who can provide you with knowledge, marketing tactics, cultural insight that you might not have had otherwise. So, and this includes like cultural differences, but also age differences as well. So technological imperatives, so technology helping us connect people all around the world, but also people without access to technology. So why is it important to study technology in terms of intercultural communication? Yep, the digital divide between people who have access to technology and not. And have you guys seen the news at all this week? I think it's in Myanmar. This is also why it's important to realize there's like to think about technology in the course or in the context of intercultural communication. So I think earlier this month, Myanmar had a coup. They overthrew a democratically elected government. And now the military that has come in to take over has shut down the internet. Who knew you could do that? You can cut off the internet access of a country. But if we did not have technology, like if there was an even bigger digital divide, then we wouldn't know that this was going on. We wouldn't be able to say, oh my gosh, what's going on in Myanmar? You know, and what can we do to help it? You know, how can we get people in there to assist and make sure that this does not continue? So they're near total internet blackout with only 16% connectivity levels. Imagine if you guys only had, you know, 16% connectivity, like y'all would go crazy. But imagine if you're in the middle of a massive protest against a coup. So, but yeah, the biggest thing is the digital divide, and you know, it connects us with people all over the world and lets us see what's going on. Whether those things be really positive, like, oh, they're doing more vaccine research in Germany, or things like, oh no, there was a military coup in Myanmar and now they're cutting out the internet. What about or do we have anything else to add to that before we go on to the peace imperative?
International communication.
So if we didn't have as good technology as we had, do you really think we would have got like the COVID vaccine, been able to communicate with all the different labs to be able to distribute it and get it out to people? Probably not. But that's all international communication and being able to talk to people from all over the world and interact and get answers, solve problems. Anything else before we go on to peace? So our peace imperative, why is it important to study peace and war, I guess, on the opposite side of that? I know you guys have answers, and I don't know why my chat keeps like refusing to come up. So for all those, if you guys are typing in the chat, I'm sorry, it's not wanting to pop up. Or not, maybe. Who am I gonna call on? Who's in? Oh, there it goes. Alexis, what about you? Why do we think it's important to study peace? Okay, well, if no Alexis, Suzette, what about you? What do you think for the peace imperative?
So we can remain at peace with everybody. So like, so we can understand where everybody's coming from and remain like without having to go to war with anybody. So kind of keep everything like leveled.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's the basic gist of it. We want to, like, peace is important because we don't want to go to war. War is very destructive. Um, we're actually living, in the most peaceful time in human history. We want to keep it that way, right? But most conflict is not international conflict. Most conflict is internal conflict between cultural groups, between tribes, within countries, rather than international conflict. Because, if the next time we have a major international conflict, we all have nuclear warheads, and that's just not going to be good for anyone. So we typically don't do that anymore. But remaining at peace with people within our nation states, within our countries, is important because we live in close quarters with them. Like, the US is probably not going to go to war, but that doesn't mean the people within it aren't going to, like, with themselves. But obviously we don't want that to happen, so it's important to be able to understand the other side. Whether that be political communication and interacting across political lines, or whether it be saying, oh, well, you're from the Midwest and I'm from the Southwest or whatever. So, we need to come to a side, or we need to come together with our differences because y'all are obsessed with Hatch chilies and I just don't get it. And then the ethical imperative. So our ethics. Why do we need to just understand other people? Why do we need to, say, are there universal ethics or are they more relative? Like,
I think it helps us like confront people and how we confront certain people. So some people will be like, this is a standard right throughout the entire world, but others are like, well, this is my individual right. I believe this is right in my culture. So I think it helps us to just be able to confront people in a way of being open-minded without assuming that there's one wrong and one right.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's probably the biggest part of it too. So, being able to talk about ethics and being able to talk about right and wrong without being like, oh, well, you're wrong because you think differently. Caleb?
Like
So understanding cultural behavior and where it comes from? Did we have something pop up in the chat, or was I just like, so yeah, peace between all cultures. Sorry, Alexis, I just saw that come up. And yeah, communicate in the best way possible to connect. So, how can we connect? What's the best way to go about connecting with people? And, open-minded, saying, okay, well, I might not agree with you. I might not think this is right, but how did you get to this point where you thought it was right? This leads us into what is the difference between universalist and relativist views on ethics. So a universalist believes what, and a relativist believes what? Jace, I know you know these ones.
No, these ones are confusing me though. Isn't like universalist like kind of like see like the big picture like everyone else is kind of like more self-based?
Yes. So a universalist would say, for the big picture, there definitely are more universal ethics. So any other minor details are just that they're minor. So things are more, what's the word I'm looking for? Cosmetic. So differences are more cosmetic than deeply rooted. So then what would a relativist be then? And you don't have to answer that one since you just answered the universalist. Okay. Kaylee, what do you think?
Hey, Haley. Oh. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you said Haley or Kaylee.
Oh, whichever one, just somebody. Okay. Well, Haley, do you want to answer?
I can. Is relativist like they believe that each culture kind of has their own beliefs? Like there's not a set of beliefs that are over the entire globe?
And the big thing with relativist is can only be judged within that context. I wonder if Dr. Chedester got bored with our review. Sad. Okay, so individualistic and collectivist.
Wait, I have a question.
What's up?
So on a relativist, would that be more like I guess like a really strict culture like Muslim or something?
If you are like from an Arabic culture, I mean, it honestly, universalist and relativist are definitely more personal. But if you think that there is a universal right and wrong and that there are certain morals and ethics that everyone has, then you're a universalist. So if you are part of one of the Abrahamic religions, so Judaism, Muslim, Christian, you might tend to be more of a universalist if you think that there is a universal right and wrong because your religion, if that's what that says.
So universalist is like more strict.
Yeah, they're like this is right and this is wrong. Rather than just being more of like, okay, well, your culture does this and I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong to marry off 12-year-olds, but you do you.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
So individualistic versus collectivist cultures. So how do they differ? So an individualistic and then collectivist. Who knows what an individualistic culture is?
America, right? Like American culture, we're very freedom and stuff.
Yep, American culture is definitely very individualistic. So American definitely more values personal freedom. The focus is more on the individual. We get kicked out of the house at 18 and get told good luck. So a collectivist culture, what would be an example of a collectivist culture?
You think China would be one because they prioritize like kind of like family name?
Definitely. So China is definitely more collectivist culture. They put more value on the group. So the focus is more on group effort and what the group can achieve. Honestly, that's the basic gist of that too. So globalization. So what is globalization?
Isn't it like all the like different cultures from other places like coming to other parts, I guess. I don't really know how to like a definition, but it'd be like style of like clothing from China becomes popular in the US and then it's over here now and stuff in the United States becomes popular in China, so that wasn't there originally.
Basically, I mean, I guess we could just go to define globalization. So the process by businesses and other organizations develop influence or operate on an international scale. So yes, so if Chinese clothing becomes popular in the US and they are developing international influence, like the websites like Alibaba, Shine, what are the other other websites that people use? You always get like Instagram ads for them, but they're always out of China. Or start operating on an international scale. So like Hollywood, hugely globalized industry. The American movie industry, just the movie industry in general is hugely globalized. They all have influence on each other. Like heck, even Bollywood movies from India are super popular in certain places in the US. Can you guys come up with some quick examples of how communication is symbolic or made of symbols?
Hand gestures. Duh.
Yeah, cute, super easy one is just hand gestures. They're just symbols. They mean nothing except the meaning you assign them. So different hand gestures mean different things in different cultures because, you know, they've given those, they've decided that, you know, this means hello or goodbye, or this means like peace out, or this means like, wow, you're gonna really insult me like that, bro? So communication can be unintentional. Does anyone have an example of this? I can tell you one right now, sitting in my classroom. I got some examples of it.
Yeah, every time that I like raise my hand anywhere above my shoulders, just in my statistics class, whether it's to like move my mask or my glasses, like my teacher will stop the whole class and ask if I have a question. So it's annoying, but.
Definitely. I do that in my class too. I'm kind of guilty of that. Like I'll see someone with their hand kind of up and I'll be like, do you have a question? But that's also because I want people to talk in my class because it's like pulling teeth to get you guys to say anything most of the time. So communication is receiver orientated. So
Someone might get offended on a question that wasn't meant to be or like offensive.
that's a really straightforward one too. So the person who you're talking to gets to decide if something's offensive or not, or if something's insulting, even if you weren't trying to be. So, you know, we've all made those faux pas before and saying, oh, you know, like, I'm trying to think of a question that would slightly offend someone that's like not over the top offensive. I don't know, everything I could think of would be like really, really offensive. But you know, you could say hello to someone, or you could say, my friends always make fun of me because I say Happy Christmas or like, you know, whatever instead of Merry Christmas. And they'll just like, why do you do that? Like, it's Merry Christmas, not Happy Christmas. And it's like, okay, you're gonna get offended by me changing one word, or gosh, how would you guys react if I said like Happy Holidays or Blessed Yule or Happy Kwanzaa? And then so communication is dynamic, so communication is always changing. Oh, this one's a great one for that. Do you guys still use the word yeet, or was that like so 3 years ago?
Long time ago.
My middle schoolers were all about the word yeet, and I'm just like, I don't even know what this means. But slang is a really straightforward one as to why it's always changing. Like, what's the slang now? Like something's on fire, or gosh, what do I hear you guys say?
Gucci.
Gucci. Yes, I hear people say Gucci. Wait, was that you, Gary?
Yeah, I always have to ask for clarification. I'm like, okay, is that good or bad?
Okay, yeah, I was thinking, I was like, I've heard Scotty say that. No, yeah, so.
Yeah. You know, it's crazy. This whole section about communication is, I really think, the biggest challenge that we face, like culturally with other countries, other groups, but like even in the workplace, every time there's a problem, or not every time, but like 90% of all issues I deal with like people being upset or anything, it always comes down to communication. And it is dynamic with like when texting first came out, and we had all these things like, you know, I'm even afraid to say them because I don't know what they all mean, but you know, like LOL and acronyms. I remember when texting first started, and you know, my mom was texting, and my mom's like 70, and she's texting her aunt whose husband had passed, and she was like, "Yeah, I heard about your husband, LOL," and she thought that LOL meant lots of love, and it means laugh out loud. And so yeah, you got to be careful. Things change quickly, and you know, the people in my demographic, fortunately I have some kids that keep me up to date in how to use some of those things.
Different generations are definitely different cultures. Like, just, and especially when you get like the new technology mixed in with that, it is ripe for humor and misunderstandings. So what's the difference between stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination?
You know, I didn't realize, but when I found out that stereotypes are actually kind of a natural process that can occur just from experience. And then, you know, stereotypes is often, you know, super politically incorrect and all those things, but there's like this process that occurs, and you develop these stereotypes based on your experiences and interactions. But we have to be super careful, you know, that we're checking those, or checking our stereotypes against reality, or maybe our just very sheltered view or something can make those bad, or not, you know, not accurate. And if you only meet one person from, let's say, a particular country, and they have a particular nuance that you don't like, then you can quickly stereotype people from that country as being, you know, something.
Good thoughts. So what about prejudice then?
Being hateful towards a certain like culture or people.
One thing with prejudice, it's based on little to no actual experience with the group that you are being hateful towards. You know, everyone has stereotypes and anyone can be prejudiced. But when you add prejudice and power, then you get discrimination. So you have the disliking or being hateful against a group plus the power to actually take an action. So that is it for our review. Did anyone have anything else that they wanted to add into this? Or do you guys think that you are probably good for the test?
Test will be online, correct?
Correct. So if you go over here to, well, actually, if you just go to the home page, it should pop up right there under coming up, but you can also go over here to the quizzes and you can see, oh, we got test 1, then we got midterm, then we got test 3, and then we got post-test. So yeah, you can just click on that. It's 13 questions, 32 points. I'm not going to pull up the preview because this is being recorded. You're just like, maybe you should pull up the preview.
No one's gonna say anything.
Except the other class when they find out. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording here and we're gonna take like a 3-minute break, get a drink of water, stretch, and then we will come back and talk about interviewing, all right?